Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
However, under the bombardment of offensive spells, the charming demons would explode with a huge amount of aphrodisiac that would be almost as thick as mist. Even the golden rays of light ubiquitous in the palace would be obscured. Fortunately, Lin Li had used the power of holy light and made it engulf the entire expedition. Otherwise, even if the charming demons were all annihilated, the people of the expedition would immediately become beasts in heat. If all the members of the expedition team were in heat, it would definitely be an absolute disaster. However, for the abyssal demons, the influence of the aphrodisiac made them experience a surge in strength, which was similar to when orcs used berserking skills. All of a sudden, the attacks launched by the abyssal demons became even more ferocious and menacing, as if they had become undead creatures. They did not care about their injuries at all. However, in the face of this, the mages of the Tower of Dusk also immediately changed their tactics by beginning to use offensive ice spells to deal with the charming demons. As the offensive ice spells landed, the plump charming demons immediately became ice sculptures before getting crushed by the abyssal demons rushing up from behind. That left the aphrodisiac of the charming demons with no chance to explode and spread in a large area. As the expedition continued to delve deeper, the abyssal demons that surged out from all sides increased in number. Besides, they were not just skinning walkers and charming demons, there were also more strong and powerful demons. There were rock demons that were formed from black rocks, 9-headed demonic snakes, abyssal pygmies with short bodies, large-sized black iron demonic apes, winged angels that flew in the sky, abyssal assassins whose bodies were like phantoms, and so on. Those abyssal demons did not belong to the same layer of the abyss in the first place, and some of them were even rivals. Once they met, they would definitely fight to death. However, in here, they seemed to have put all rivalry behind them, and became comrades in war. Obviously, there had to be a powerful existence above them, that had absolute dominance over them, and which they couldn't resist. This time, the team of the Rotterdam Kingdom put in more effort to perform harder for the sake of pleasing Lin Li, the sanctuary powerhouse. Firstly, the alchemy colossuses in front wasted no time in exerting a powerful offensive role to maintain the advancing speed of the expedition. The various alchemy arrays on the alchemy colossuses' bodies flickered continuously as they ferociously attacked the rock demons and other abyssal demons that were getting in their way with their iron fists. There were sounds of vigorous clashing, with sparks of collision and stone chips flying everywhere. The alchemy colossuses seemed to be bent on clearing up a path among the abyssal demons even if they had to slam their bodies against them. Besides, that was indeed the case. Faced with the alchemy colossus's tyrannical way of opening up a path, there were very few abyssal demons that could block the team even for a moment. After all, the alchemy colossuses were steel machines, and the abyssal demons were not undead creatures. They would definitely feel it even when the rocks on their bodies were damaged. In fact, it was precisely such a battle that gave the alchemy colossuses a greater advantage that no creature could ever imitate. The vanguard that the 20 alchemy colossuses formed in front of the expedition was like a group of large machines that cleared up the path. Amidst the continuous sound of roaring, they moved forward unstoppably, clearing up a path amidst the demons. Seeing such a situation, the members of the team of the Brilliant Shrine couldn't help but be secretly startled. The construction of an alchemy colossus was not simple at all. Otherwise, if there was really a large number of such alchemy colossuses that formed a steel torrent, it would probably sweep through the entire anvil. The 10 mobile magical crystal cannons behind the alchemy colossuses were not put away. Instead, they were also moving and continuously emitting rays of mana that were as thick as buckets. The mana cannons were invincible against enemies below the legendary level. Even abyssal demons like the black iron demonic apes, which were known for their defensive power, would be pierced by a single cannon shot when facing the light from the mana cannons. However, the only thing that was a pity was that although the light from the mana cannons was powerful, they consumed a shocking number of magical crystals as well. Level 10 magical crystals were basically used up in just a single shot. Level 15 magical crystals were only enough to launch a few to a dozen volleys. The magical crystals harvested previously during the exploration were almost depleted, and they probably would have to use the ones from their personal stash in no time. Unless they could reach their original goal, the expedition this time would definitely be a huge loss. Actually, that was not Donald's last resort. He just had to prove the value of his team's presence, like what Lin Li had said to him when they were in the undead world. If they were of no value, they would only end up being abandoned. Through the previous experiences, Donald learned that if his team was left alone, not a single of its members would leave alive, let alone reach their goal. In fact, compared to the previous battle, the alchemy colossuses of the Rotterdam Kingdom faced tremendous pressure, but the situation looked much better thanks to Donald's desperate attempt to attack at all costs. Donald was anguished when he was commanding. After all, alchemy colossuses were very precious even to the Rotterdam Kingdom, and every little bit of damage would cost a great deal of money to repair later on. However, Donald gradually had some enlightenment when he watched the alchemy colossuses that were fighting in front. Shouldn't the battles of alchemy colossuses be like this? The alchemy colossuses themselves were offensive weapons, and their battles should be intense and violent. Even if they had to use their own bodies to slam against the enemies, they had to break through the obstacles in front of them. The alchemy colossus had always been a cutting-edge weapon in the Rotterdam Kingdom, and the materials used in its manufacture had to be rare and excellent. Otherwise, using ordinary materials would be an insult to the alchemy colossus. Naturally, every single alchemy colossus was high in value, so they were even more careful when using them for fear that the alchemy colossuses would be damaged. However, doing so would go against the significance of the existence of the alchemy colossuses, and cause the alchemy colossuses to be unable to play an effective role in battle. If they could not bear to use the alchemy colossuses, what was the point of building them? A true alchemy colossus should be constructed with the most common materials, and crush all enemies in its path with its massive kinetic power and defense during battles. Thinking about the current construction cost of each alchemy colossus, he realized that if he were to build them using ordinary materials, he would be able to build 10 at the same cost. Besides, even if ordinary materials were used, the role they could play on the battlefield would definitely not be inferior to that of the delicate alchemy colossus. However, the combat power displayed by more than 10 alchemy colossuses made of ordinary materials would definitely be far greater than that of a single alchemy colossus that was built with precious materials. Of course, even though he had figured this out, Donald was still feeling the pinch. After all, the alchemy colossuses that were being used now were not built with ordinary materials. The alchemy colossuses of the Rotterdam Kingdom were fighting hard without hesitation and concern for anything else, causing the expedition's speed to be unaffected by the demons at all. They were pushing through the demons and roaring like steel chariots. On the other hand, the Holy Light Knights of the Brilliant Shrine were teaming up and singing the Holy Light battle song on both sides of the expedition. They continuously charged towards the demons that rushed up from the sides like spinning blades that were mounted on wheels of steel chariots. In the middle of the team, the priests of the Brilliant Shrine were continuously enhancing the Holy Light Knights with all sorts of theurgy, while the mages of the Tower of Dusk's team cleared the abyssal demons that were surging in with long-range attacks. After the numerous battles previously, the three teams from the three forces of the expedition had made considerable progress in improving their coordination. Under Lin Li's command, the expedition continuously adjusted their direction, advancing rapidly towards the deepest part of the palace against the intense attacks of the abyssal demons. Fortunately, Lin Li had had some experience in exploring the Well of the Sun previously. Otherwise, finding a proper route in the massive maze-like palace would not be an easy thing. You are F4 stories on OVLBN CM. However, as the expedition delved deeper, the abyssal demons that appeared around them became more and more powerful. Even the powerful abyssal demon dragons had also appeared. The Well of the Sun was just like a small endless abyss. Other than the demons that could not leave the abyss, most of the demons that were commonly seen there were present. However, in order to ensure the speed of the expedition's advancement, the legendary powerhouses of the team gradually joined the battle. No matter how ferocious the abyssal demons were, the role that the legendary powerhouses could play in a battle at this level was massive. Archbishop Martin, Donald, and the legendary powerhouses of the Tower of Dusk would be able to smoothly disintegrate the abyssal demons' attacks with every move they made. The alchemy colossuses waved their iron fists and blasted away enemies hampering the expedition's progress. Amidst the flickering light of the alchemy arrays on the alchemy colossuses, the loud and clear battle song echoed in the air as the Holy Light Knights crossed paths, causing the abyssal demons to become souls of the dead below the cross. The mages of the team were continuously chanting magic incantations, and magic spells blasted down against the expedition like mags. The abyssal demons roared and died amidst the magic spells. When faced with a powerful abyssal demon, the legendary powerhouses left their team and joined forces. There were almost no demons that could last for a moment under their attacks. Everyone in the expedition focused on what they had to do, causing the operation of the team to be incredibly smooth. Not only did the advancement speed not decrease, they even began to show signs of speeding up. In the massive palace, they shuttled through like an irresistible force, leaving behind countless abyssal demon corpses in their wake. However, just when everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly, an unexpected situation occurred. and forced the expedition to stop in their tracks. When the team of mages cast a magic storm on a bunch of abyssal demons, a sudden force directed the magic storm in another direction, making it all enter a gate in the palace. What was stranger was the silence after the magic storm entered the door. There was no sound of explosion. It was as if it all had vanished without a trace. Shortly after, an ugly bloated monster crawled out from the gate. It was like an obese abyssal demon dragon that had two spike-like horns on its ridiculously big head. Its mouth was so huge that it seemed like it'd be able to swallow a raging bull. Its muscular limbs seemed to be exceptionally slim and weak on that obese body. That monster was moving on its belly like a snake or a disgusting maggot, inching out of the gate. The sight of that disgusting monster prompted the mages in the expedition to start reciting their spells. They generated a magic storm made up of powerful spells again, and cast it on the monster's body. At the same time, the 10 mobile crystal cannons from the Rotterdam cast 10 rays of blinding light, as thick as water buckets on the monster. However, the monster was not deterred by those attacks. It lifted its head slowly as it opened its mouth. The mouth became bigger than its body, and sucked at the magic storm and cannons. At once, the sky-filling magic storm and cannon shots landed in the gigantic mouth of the monster, and were never to be heard of again. The sight dazzled the expedition. The magic storm and magical crystal cannon shots were powerful attacks that not everyone could deal with, not to mention keeping them inside one's tummy. Lord Devourer Gaul. I didn't expect the disgusting beast to be here, shrieked Conorus. He lived in the endless abyss for countless years, and was thus rather knowledgeable about the different infamous demon lords in the abyss. He recognized the monster immediately. Lord Devourer Gaul. What a suitable name, muttered Lin Li with an unusual expression. He seemed to be unsurprised by what he had witnessed. At this time, Donald, who was eager to claim the credit, had already ordered the alchemy colossuses and his team to charge at Lord Gaul. His 10 alchemy colossuses started to march towards Gaul. Ray at updated street rise at N. Vel. Ben. Com. It was obvious that the Lord Devourer Gaul had tremendous ability to absorb magic. Using magic on it would only give the beast a sumptuous feast, but anyone would be able to tell from the overstuffed body that movement was not its advantage. Even clumsy alchemy colossuses had movements more agile than the monster. Hence, Donald immediately ordered his alchemy colossuses to battle Lord Devourer. He thought that their immense strength would be able to tear its body into pieces. At this time, however, the abyssal demons around the expedition had not decreased in number. In fact, they were still entering the scene from all directions. Although the Rotterdam's alchemy colossuses had incredible force, it was not easy to leave the team to advance towards Lord Devourer. It was fortunate that despite his desire to let Lin Li notice his ability, Donald remained vigilant. The alchemy colossuses he sent were not those in the front line of the expedition. It was another dozen alchemy colossuses that were slightly smaller, but had greater agility. They were like warriors amongst the alchemy colossuses. They had huge weapons in their hands, and machete-like blades on their joints. After charging into the crowd of abyssal demons, they immediately displayed incredible combat prowess. At the same time, other alchemy colossuses in the expedition and the 10 mobile crystal cannons worked to help the more agile alchemy colossuses clear the enemies in their path. The sight of his alchemy colossuses getting closer to Lord Devourer put a smile on Donald's face. It was as if he was already watching his alchemy colossuses tear the monster down. The people in the expedition had their eyes on the progress of the alchemy colossuses as they fought the troops of demons. They were like Donald. They thought that the 10 alchemy colossuses were the natural enemy of the monster, and as long as they could get close enough, the monster would be incapacitated. At the very same time, the gigantic Lord Devourer Gaul lowered its head slightly. Then, it opened its enormous mouth to face the alchemy colossuses charging toward it. A cyclone appeared in front of Lord Devourer and shook the abyssal demons that were directly in front of it. They wanted to flee the area, but were drawn backwards. They lost control of their movements and were sent flying. A large number of abyssal demons started to shriek hysterically. This included the rock demons, which resembled the alchemy colossuses in size, though they were slightly smaller, the short abyssal pygmies, as well as other types of abyssal demons. However, no matter how they struggled, they could not seem to resist that immense force of attraction, and entered the gigantic mouth of the Lord Devourer. "Quick, come back!" Donald hollered when he saw what happened to the abyssal demons. He realized he had underestimated the appetite of Lord Devourer. It was definitely not a picky eater. However, Donald's order to retreat was too late. While the dozen alchemy colossuses knew that something was amiss when they saw Lord Devourer swallowing the abyssal demons, they realized that they had no power to resist the force exerted by the Lord Devourer. In the blink of an eye, several alchemy colossuses that were in the front started to rise into the air, and thus lost their strength to resist the Lord Devourer. They entered its mouth very quickly. While the body of Lord Devourer was enormous, what it had swallowed was larger than its enormous body. Yet, It seemed that its body size remained the same after swallowing them. It was as though its stomach was a black hole. Lin Li could not help but feel amazed at what he had just witnessed. It was not that he was plotting against the Rotterdam. It was an amazement with Goal's great appetite. Lin Li had confronted Lord Devourer alone as a hunter, who was exploring the Well of the Sun in the Endless World. Although he had seen Lord Devourer swallow many abyssal demons, it was not as shocking, as those were made of blood and flesh. They were unlike the alchemy colossuses that were made of firm metal. However, it was this sight that helped Lin Li feel certain that Lord Devourer had the mastery of a type of disintegration law that could help its body digest anything in its system, not just its biological ability. If not, there could never be a digestion mechanism strong enough to help anyone digest a few alchemy colossuses almost instantaneously. Under Donald's orders, the 20 alchemy colossuses in the front line shot metal hooks towards the other alchemy colossuses that were trapped in the precarious situation. They started to use all their might to bring these alchemy colossuses back to the team. Roar! Lord Devourer growled. It seemed to be displeased that its food was snatched. Its growl gathered clouds above the expedition. Lightning bolts as well as hailstones and aerolites showered onto the expedition crazily like raindrops. It was fortunate that the mages from the Tower of Dusk had cast the magic shields in time. Layers of magic shields helped to shield the entire expedition. Although that merely blocked a single wave of magic attacks from Lord Devourer, it helped to win time for the rest of the team. As the priests and more people entered the battle, the defense of the team was finally stabilized. But at the same time, the abyssal demons around the expedition seemed to have descended into lunacy. They started to attack the team ferociously. Those who launched suicide attacks exhibited an impact comparable to legendary spells. The expedition that was relentless previously was forced to go on the defensive against Lord Devourer and the abyssal demons. The only bright side for them was the success of the 20 alchemy colossuses in reclaiming their several counterparts from Lord Devourer. Donald really felt like crying now. If his alchemy colossuses had been damaged, he would still have been able to fix them. Even if he couldn't, he would still have kept his metallurgists within the alchemy colossuses. He had invested so much to nurture those talents, but now that the metallurgists had been swallowed together with their alchemy colossuses, it was obvious that there was no way for him to recover those talents. However, now was not the time for Donald to feel remorse. The magic storm above might have been gotten rid of, but the frenzied abyssal demons were still wreaking havoc. He had to bring the team from the Rotterdam into the battle soon. While the metallurgists who were rescued by the rest of the alchemy colossuses had not recovered from their trauma, they had no choice but to put themselves together to enter the battle with the abyssal demons. Actually, the threat posed by those abyssal demons was rather limited. The real deal was Lord Devourer Gaul, which had a great appetite. Devouring was not its only ability. Lord Devourer was merely at the peak of the legendary realm. Lin Li could sense that it had not stepped into the sanctuary realm. However, no one knew how many demons it had absorbed over the thousands of years it had been living in the Well of the Sun. It was possible that it had devoured the treasures from the palace as well. The accumulated power from all of the things it had devoured had to be an unthinkable danger. Furthermore, according to Lin Li's guesses, the magic gears and traps in the Well of the Sun had to be dysfunctional due to Lord Devourer. The countless magic gears and traps meant that there had to be at least 100,000 mana sources. Their combined power would be terrifying. If one were to compare Lord Devourer and the tender elemental Wyrm Xiaohua, the former would definitely have much more power than the latter. Hence, although it had not entered the sanctuary realm, its massive power made it possible for it to compete against sanctuary powerhouses. After all, a real sanctuary powerhouse would not have such a great amount of energy. What set them apart would only be the comprehension of these abilities. While it cast its destructive spells, Lord Devourer opened its enormous mouth and sucked at the expedition. It was clear that it had the intention to devour all of them. The expedition was a scrumptious feast to the Lord Devourer. The team was made up of a dozen legendary powerhouses. If it could devour the expedition, Lord Devourer would have a high chance to barge into the sanctuary realm. The people from the expedition immediately felt the great force of attraction tugging at them the very moment it opened its mouth. This was especially so for the alchemy colossuses from the Rotterdam that were at the front line. They started to move with the force. The metallurgists within them could not help but become anxious when they thought of the sight of their teammates who were swallowed by Lord Devourer. They immediately fought against the force at their fullest capacity. By reason, if the alchemy colossuses that had huge and heavy bodies had trouble withstanding the force exerted by Lord Devourer, it would be extremely easy for the rest of the people in the team to be swallowed by it. However, the Holy Light Knights on the flanks of the expedition were able to resist it with their battle formation that connected them all together as they formed the Light Domain. Unlike them, the alchemy colossuses were unable to form such a delicate and seamless battle formation. Their huge and heavy bodies seemed to turn them into targets for devouring. After noticing this situation, Donald immediately thought of a solution. That was to recreate the scene when they were rescuing the other alchemy colossuses. He let all the alchemy colossuses from the Rotterdam connect to one another with the help of chains. Although this hindered their mobility, it played a part against the strength of Lord Devourer. It was as though they were playing the tug of war with Lord Devourer. Grrr. Lord Devourer sucked at the expedition, but only abyssal demons entered its mouth. The taste of the demons which it had long been sick and tired of enraged it. After a long growl, the sky darkened immediately. The golden glow of light within the palace became a faint glow that seemed like it would be extinguished at any time. At the same time, the abyssal demons that were surrounding the expedition appeared to be deeply agonized. They shrieked as their bodies started to inflate like a balloon quickly. The mana waves on their bodies seemed to be rising at a shocking speed as well. It was obvious that eating was not only the talent of Lord Devourer. The monster knew to transfer mana into the abyssal demons to forcefully raise their power. In the blink of an eye, those abyssal demons that were in the legendary level were raised to their next level. Those that were not in the legendary level rose to the peak of level 19 as well. There were also demons that exploded because they could not withstand the energy within them. There were a few thousand abyssal demons in this region now. This included hundreds of demons in the legendary realm. Their progress and energy could only show how massive the powers of Lord Devourer were. Of course, the forced power increase was not the holy light baptism Lin Li gave to the people from the Brilliant Shrine. It was an unnatural transmission of energy from Lord Devourer to the demons. It was brutal enough to burst demons. For demons which had yet to explode from the transmission, there would not be any good results waiting for them, either. If they were not eaten by Lord Devourer in the future, their lives would not last long, either. Yet, to Lord Devourer, these demons were only its food that it had long been sick and tired of. It paid no attention to their lives at all. Transferring mana to these demons to use them as baits for more delicious food was what that mattered more. Very soon, the abyssal demons that had their power raised stopped screaming in agony. They pounced towards the expedition with violent mana. All they wanted to do was to vent the energy within their bodies. To the expedition, however, it was not anything great. Those skinning walkers that originally thrived on speed became faster. It was difficult to notice their movements with the naked eye. The black iron demonic apes that had a strong build acquired more strength and increased in height. All of their punches had enough strength to send an alchemy colossus flying. The other abyssal demons were the same. Each of their abilities were raised by multiple folds, and they had incredibly strong bodies and mana. The Lord Devourer that had raised the power of the abyssal demons did not wait for its demons to send the delicacies to it, either. It continued to cast powerful spells against the expedition mercilessly. Those legendary level spells that showered the team would suffice to destroy a city instantaneously. No powerhouse in the peak of the legendary level would have the ability to withstand them. Their impact was even stronger than the combined attacks from the horde of corpse dragons. The doomsday-like scene in the terrifying magic storm stunned everyone. Archbishop Martin, Donald, and the rest shifted their gazes to Lin Li. They thought that only a sanctuary powerhouse like Lin Li would have the ability to resolve such a terrifying problem, and Lin Li did not disappoint them. He exerted a mysterious wave at the sanctuary level. The energy was not tyrannical, but it seemed inaccessible like the sky of stars. Then, Lin Li raised the holy light in his hands and brought a blinding ray of light into the mess that was created by the magic storm. Instantly, the space trembled, and it was as though a sun rose where the light shone. Layers of light dispersed the magic storm immediately. After dispersing the magic storm, Lin Li teleported before Lord Devourer from the defended region. Instead of feeling fear, the Lord Devourer became excited knowing that his enemy was a sanctuary powerhouse. While it could only enter the sanctuary realm after eating many beings at the peak of the legendary realm, Lord Devourer knew that a single sanctuary powerhouse would bring him into the sanctuary realm. Although Lord Devourer was merely at the peak of the legendary realm, the powers accumulated within its body through the years of devouring its prey and other items gave it immense powers comparable to that of real sanctuary powerhouses. What it lacked was the mastery of those. The Lord Devourer did not hesitate when it saw Lin Li appearing in front of it. It opened its mouth immediately and used an immense force to surround Lin Li's body. It was as though Lord Devourer was ready to absorb the stars in the sky. However, Lin Li was not keen to enter the belly of Lord Devourer like the Monkey King. 1. He understood that Lord Devourer was not dependent on biological digestion, but rather a law that could help it disintegrate all sorts of materials. Despite being a sanctuary powerhouse, Lin Li did not have the guts to test whether he had the ability to resist such a law. Hence, Lin Li activated his space robe and teleported behind Lord Devourer. He used the holy light to concretize a white light and threw it at the Lord Devourer. Bam! There was a sound of explosion, and the enormous Lord Devourer was thrown 5 to 6 meters away from its original spot. However, it seemed to be uninjured by the attack. Although Lin Li did not use any magic in this attack, the impact of the debris of the stars already surpassed spells in the legendary level. Yet, for it to leave 0 injuries on Lord Devourer, it meant the beast had to have a defense capability, even more powerful than the ancient Wyrms. Of course, this was not out of Lin Li's expectations. He expected the beast to use all of the energy it had accumulated over time on defense. It was one of the reasons why it could have the ability to challenge a sanctuary powerhouse. The energy it had absorbed over the years had turned into a crystal that no sanctuary powerhouse would be able to break with a single attack. Although Lin Li had experience battling Lord Devourer when he was at the Well of the Sun in the Endless World, there was always a difference between the fictional and real world. Despite the two worlds being similar to each other, Lin Li was a hunter in the Endless World. It was a game that could allow him to tap on the system to fight against his enemy. Now that he was a mage in Anral, the only power for him to use was his own. Although it was uninjured after being bashed by Lin Li, the action infuriated Lord Devourer. It stabilized its swollen body and turned its gigantic head around. It opened its mouth, but did not mobilize the suction force. This time, it splattered a huge amount of magic towards Lin Li. It was like tide water surging towards him. Yet, the frightening tide of magic merely engulfed Lin Li's shadow. Lin Li activated his space robe and teleported to the side of Lord Devourer. He created a solar sphere with the laws of light and darkness and dropped it on the body of Lord Devourer. It exploded instantaneously and sent Lord Devourer tumbling away. While Lord Devourer seemed to be at the losing end, it was merely appearances. It did not seem to be suffering from any injury. Its freakish defense mechanism would certainly induce a headache even in gods. Lin Li felt the danger as well. He teleported to another location around the monster and watched as a giant hand that was made of mana appeared from the void. It made a grabbing action where Lin Li was previously standing at. Lin Li's inability to defeat Lord Devourer despite being a sanctuary powerhouse spawned fear within Archbishop Martin and Donald and the rest of the expedition. However, since Lin Li had helped to attract its attention, it gave the rest time to focus on the other abyssal demons. Although these abyssal demons had their power forcefully raised by Lord Devourer, they weren't a great threat to the expedition. To eliminate the abyssal demons in the shortest amount of time, the expedition transited from defense to launching their attacks onto the abyssal demons wholeheartedly. This was especially so for the legendary powerhouses. They left the team and charged into the crowd of abyssal demons, like tigers entering a herd of sheep, and used powerful spells and slew the demons relentlessly. Connorus waved the eternal frost blade to create empty space to devour the lives of the abyssal demons. Norfaller used his heaven's wrath and bolted within the group of abyssal demons, leaving behind bodies that were sliced in two. 1. A character in the Chinese classic Journey to the West, Ufalusi recited his spell. Death aura filled the air, and one could see with the naked eye that the abyssal demons were aging and rotting very quickly. Master Basil, Archbishop Martin, and Donald exhibited their respective magical domains. The power of light and elemental powers brought the frenzied abyssal demons into destruction. The alchemy colossuses, Holy Light Knights, team of mages from the Tower of Dusk, and Death Knights worked together as though they were parts of a giant meat-mincing machine. Without the influence of Lord Devourer, these abyssal demons had zero defense against the expedition. However, no one from the expedition felt a sense of joy because of this. They knew that killing all of the abyssal demons would not entail ultimate victory. The key that would decide whether they succeeded was the other battleground, the place their sanctuary powerhouse was battling at. Archbishop Martin and Donald felt embarrassed when they saw the battle between Lord Devourer and Lin Li. They realized that exploring the relic site left behind by the Immortal King would have been a distant dream if they had attempted it alone. The Immortal King was the most powerful existence in Anral's history. The treasures he left behind were definitely not what common men could vie for. There was no progress in the battle Lin Li was having with Lord Devourer. Lin Li made use of the space robe to teleport around the body of Lord Devourer. With each appearance, he would unleash a harsh attack on the beast. Yet, no matter how powerful each strike was, he did not manage to tear down the defense put up by the monster. The most he did was to shake the body of that swollen figure. Lord Devourer, on the other hand, put zero attention on the abyssal demons that were facing the slaughter. Its focus was on Lin Li, and its primary goal was to devour the sanctuary powerhouse before him. To Lord Devourer, those abyssal demons were not even its subordinates. They were its food that it had long been sick and tired of eating. Consuming large amounts of them was no longer helpful in boosting its capabilities. The sanctuary powerhouse before him, however, was its key to the sanctuary realm. Yet, Its swollen body made it incredibly difficult for it to move and capture Lin Li. It could only growl and rage. However, Lord Devourer had a massive amount of mana that allowed it to pour legendary level spells all over the place. This gave Lin Li and the rest of the expedition a lot of trouble. Some of the spells that landed on the abyssal demons helped the team eliminate them, but the rest that fell on the palace turned the once magnificent looking building into rubble. After realizing its inability to devour Lin Li, Lord Devourer stopped playing hide and seek with him. It turned to face the expedition and directed a huge wave of offensive spells onto them. This created a huge problem for the people in the expedition. They had dispersed their battle formation to improve their efficiency in defeating the abyssal demons. This gave them little advantage in putting up a reasonable defense against their enemies. The magic storm raised by Lord Devourer had an impact more terrifying than the combined attacks from the horde of corpse dragons from the undead world. Not to mention that the expedition was in a dispersed formation. It would be a challenge for them even if they were grouped together. No one knew whether it was Lord Devourer's lack of patience with Lin Li that prompted it to change its target, or it was its strategy to threaten Lin Li with the safety of the expedition. Its actions definitely struck on Lin Li's weakness. After all, even if Lin Li did not care about the lives of the men of the Brilliant Shrine in Rotterdam, it would be impossible for him to give up on the men under him. The people from the expedition could not help but feel a sense of hopelessness when they saw the magic storm coming at them. Even if they had legendary powerhouses who could escape the rain of spells, the others would definitely be disadvantaged by it. Your favorite ovals at N. Oval, Ben, Calm. This was especially for the team from the Rotterdam. The alchemy arrays that they used to defend themselves had been destroyed in the undead world, and they had no time to restore them at all. Although the alchemy colossuses had bodies made of metal, they would absolutely not survive such an attack. In fact, it did not matter whether the expedition had put up any defense against Lord Devourer. Without the collaboration among the legendary powerhouses to help the team tide over this attack, they could only seek a way to escape. But, as the people from the expedition stared at the magic storm in despair and waited for doomsday, a figure appeared between the expedition and the magic storm. Boom! Lin Li raised his small hand, but it was as though he had formed an invisible wall and helped to prevent the magic storm from getting through. There was only continuous sound of explosion, and shock waves radiated through the battlefield. The trembling battlefield sent the expedition a few steps back. The abyssal demons, on the other hand, were swept away by the powerful wave. The expedition made use of this chance to gather and create layers of defense. They knew that Lin Li would need space to confront Lord Devourer. However, after the expedition prepared by putting up their best form of defense, Lin Li did not continue to attack Lord Devourer. Instead, he bolted back into the expedition. Everyone, including Archbishop Martin and Donald, were stupefied as they thought that Lin Li was injured from his earlier battle with Lord Devourer. The expedition had been pinning all their hopes on Lin Li. If their sanctuary powerhouse did not have a way out, they knew that it would really be doomsday for all of them. Masterfully, the men cried as they turned to look at Lin Li, anxiously in hopes of getting an answer from him. Yet, before they could get any answer, Lord Devourer launched another attack aimed at them. Take full defense. I need some time, hollered Lin Li as he let the tender elemental worm Xiaohua and the twin Dracoliches out. Archbishop Martin and Donald had seen the twin Dracoliches in the previous battle in the undead world, but not Xiaohua. The sight of the tender and petite creature sparked doubts in everyone. They thought that it was ridiculous to use a palm-sized creature in such a fierce battle. Very soon, Xiaohua displayed skills that stupefied everyone. Xiaohua was comparable to Lord Devourer in terms of casting instantaneous spells of the legendary level. The layers of defensive spells gave the entire team immediate protection. It was as though a work of numerous legendary mages. In fact, if not for its power to absorb any form of energy, Xiaohua would definitely be a comparable opponent to Lord Devourer. Yet, Lord Devourer's freakish powers would only turn Xiaohua's energy into tonic. Hence, in the battle with Lord Devourer, Xiaohua could only use its powers to defend. Otherwise, there would only be a greater problem for the expedition. After telling the team to take up full defense, Lin Li retrieved from his Ring of Endless Storm a set of equipment that was used to create potions. Afterwards, he stopped caring about the happenings around him and poured all of his focus into creating a potion. This sight generated greater confusion for the people around him. Could there be any potion that would be useful to deal with that merciless Lord Devourer? Unlike the rest, although Archbishop Martin was clueless about Lin Li's intentions, his knowledge about Lin Li's identity as a pharmaceutics guru helped him to stay calm when he saw Lin Li's actions. Although there was no real pharmacist in the team from the Rotterdam, most of them knew that creating potions was a delicate task. Any slight tremble or impure particle from the air would have a chance to bring failure to the creation of a potion. Hence, It was important for pharmacists to observe strict regulations when they worked on potions. This included having fresh air and little noise. Yet it was a battlefield, after all, and not an ordinary one. The expedition could only do its best to resist the constant attacks launched by the crazy Lord Devourer. The battlefield was filled with the sounds of explosions and trembling of the ground. Anyone who dared to request a pharmacist to create his potion in such an environment would definitely earn an immediate lashing. Furthermore, no one expected someone as young as Lin Li, even if he was a sanctuary powerhouse, to be proficient in pharmaceutics. This was not to mention that there might not be any potion strong enough to defeat the Lord Devourer. Was Lin Li going to create a high-ranking potion, a master-level potion, or a legendary potion from the level of pharmaceutics gurus? Donald watched as Lin Li started to lay the bottles and jars in an extremely calm manner. He could not help but want to take advantage of the breather to inquire about Lin Li's intentions. Although Donald dared not question Lin Li, since he was a sanctuary powerhouse, everyone's lives depended on Lin Li. After all, how could they feel safe without any clarification? However, when Donald was about to make a move, Archbishop Martin pulled him back, shaking his head. The latter said, "Master Flick has his reasons for doing so don't affect him. However, is there really some kind of potion that can be used to deal with that monster?" Although Donald also hoped that that was the case, he couldn't quite convince himself given his experience and knowledge. "All we need to do is to buy time for Master Flick. That's what we should do." Actually, Archbishop Martin was not confident at all. But after thinking about the fact that Lin Li had given Pope Rosario an antidote for the Viper's poison, he had no choice but to once again pin all his hopes on Lin Li. However, without the support of the sanctuary powerhouse, the expedition was still having a hard time hanging on amidst the attacks of Lord Devourer despite having the help of the tender elemental worm Xiaohua and the twin Dracoliches. The shattering of every layer of magical defense would deal great damage to the casters of the expedition. Even legendary powerhouses like Archbishop Martin and Donald could not negate the damage. One or two of such attacks might not have a noticeable effect on any caster, but if they accumulated to a certain level, even a caster that was at the peak of the legendary level would have to bear the consequences. Besides, Lord Devourer was not just launching offensive spells like crazy. There was also a unique rhythm in the casting amidst the overwhelming magic storm. Under the guidance of this rhythm of Lord Devourer, the defense of the expedition was gradually controlled by an invisible force too. That kind of control was subtle and unchainable. In fact, even the members of the expedition knew from the beginning that they were too weak to make any changes. Regardless, the attackers would often be the ones in the active position, controlling the speed and the type of their attacks. However, the ones defending would only be in a passive position, where they were led by the nose. Clearly, the ugly-looking Lord Devourer did not only know how to fight with brute force. Instead, under the facade of fighting with brute force, there lay its unique cunningness. When the peak legendary powerhouses of the expedition sensed that their rhythm of defense was getting out of control, it was no longer possible to change it. They could fully anticipate that once their own defensive rhythm was completely incorporated into that of Lord Devourer, the only outcome that awaited them and the others would be death. It was just like being unable to control themselves as they uncontrollably slid towards the abyss despite knowing that it was an abyss. All struggles would be futile. In fact, if it weren't for the presence of the tender elemental worm Xiaohua, the expedition would probably have been devoured by Lord Devourer's magic storm. In terms of the contribution to defense, even the tender elemental worm Xiaohua alone could be on par with the rest of the members of the expedition. However, even then, no one was certain how long the expedition's defense could last. Archbishop Martin and Donald, who were barely holding on, would turn to look at Lin Li every now and then, panic-stricken and with anxiety written all over their faces. As for the others, they wanted to take a look too, but they simply had no time to be distracted because of the enormous pressure brought about by Lord Devourer. However, at this moment, Lin Li seemed to be unable to feel the tense atmosphere around him, and all he could see was the pile of pharmaceutical apparatuses in front of him. He went through the steps smoothly, one after another with absolute skillfulness. Despite the vibrations brought about by the vigorous collisions of the magic spells, there were no ripples in the potion in Lin Li's potion bottle at all. The magical flames did not flicker either. It was as if Lin Li was isolated from the world. However, Lin Li's composure did not have much effect on the people of the expedition. After all, they were the ones who were really under tremendous pressure, and they were also the ones who were worried that their defense would collapse at any time. If that were to happen, they would be the unlucky ones to die. As a sanctuary powerhouse, he would definitely be able to protect himself even if he could not kill Lord Devourer. However, the other members of the expedition, including the peak legendary powerhouses, did not have that ability. Just as the members of the expedition were eagerly waiting for Lin Li to come up with a solution, the the situation unexpectedly changed again. The magic storm that everyone could see suddenly rolled back towards Lord Devourer, but that was not something for them to rejoice about, because at the same time that the magic storm rolled back, the members of the expedition also felt a huge suction force that they could not contend with. The various defensive magic spells that were surrounding the expedition were also broken instantaneously due to the suction force. Most importantly, the timing chosen by Lord Devourer happened to be the same time that the new defense had yet to form. Of course, that opportunity was actually created by Lord Devourer, which had managed to force the expedition into that state through its control of the rhythm. The tender elemental worm Xiaohua could instantly cast legendary magic spells without limits. However, the rest of the expedition could not do so, not even the peak legendary powerhouses like Archbishop Martin and Donald. After all, even simply spitting and cursing would take them some time to catch their breath. Not to mention, they were using laws to control the magic. Casting 1 or 2 legendary magic spells instantaneously was nothing much, but continuously doing so might cause one's brain to explode too. Lord Devourer's sudden attack instantly sent the expedition into the abyss, dashing their hopes of turning the situation around. Even the tender elemental worm Xiaohua was powerless to change anything now. Once the defensive magic spells were cast, they were sucked away by the massive suction force. That giant mouth of Lord Devourer was just like a black hole that could swallow up even the stars, and the entire space began to become warped before collapsing amidst the massive suction force. In the periphery of the expedition, more than 10 holy light knights, who were engulfed in the holy light battle song, were sucked away. They finally experienced what lightning speed was like, but it did not feel good at all. The people of the expedition all knew that the 10 holy light knights were actually just one step ahead of themselves and the others, and it might not take more than a few seconds before all of them got sucked into the giant mouth. They all had the same ending, masterfully. While resisting the massive suction force, Archbishop Martin was looking over anxiously. However, they only realized after taking a look that Lin Li, who was still formulating potions just now, had gone missing. Could it be that he had abandoned everyone and fled? Archbishop Martin, Donald, and the rest also discovered that. At the same time, they also believed that it would be no issue for Lin Li to flee the place on his own with his power that was in the sanctuary realm. Hence, after seeing that Lin Li was no longer around, it became the first possibility that almost everyone thought of. Indeed, all under the sanctuary realm were just insignificant minions, whose lives a sanctuary powerhouse obviously wouldn't care about. If they were in his shoes, their own lives would probably be the first thing they would care about in this situation. Sanctuary powerhouses were existences that were close to gods, and they might one day achieve immortality. Hence, why would they be willing to die with a group of minions? Actually, not to mention the people from the teams of the Brilliant Shrine and the Rotterdam, even many of the members from the Tower of Dusk, had developed the same thoughts. However, at this moment, Lin Li's figure suddenly flashed in front of Lord Devourer, but he was not holding any debris of the stars. All he was holding was a crystal potion bottle that seemed plain and ordinary. It contained a potion that was glistening with iridescent colors. Lin Li's sudden appearance startled Lord Devourer. It did not dare to belittle a real sanctuary powerhouse, either, so it immediately cast thunderbolt flames to kill him. However, when casting the magic spells, Lord Devourer would definitely stop devouring. Otherwise, the magic it cast would be devoured by it. At the instant that the Lord Devourer stopped devouring, Lin Li raised his hand and tossed the crystal potion bottle into Lord Devourer's mouth without even looking at the thunderbolt flames. When Lord Devourer used his devouring ability, even the most toxic poison in the world would be instantly decomposed into pure energy by the nomological power that would devour everything. However, Lin Li, who had fought Lord Devourer once already, was well aware that when Lord Devourer stopped devouring, it would also stop using the laws of decomposition. The potion bottle appeared for a moment before vanishing in Lord Devourer's giant mouth. On the other hand, Lin Li immediately activated the space robe on his body, and his figure flickered immediately before returning to the spot above the expedition. Immediately after, the debris of the stars, gloomy dark, appeared in his hand. A huge barrier of light and darkness immediately engulfed the entire expedition. Almost at the same time, Lord Devourer roared and shot its mana out in all directions like an open floodgate, using its massive body as the center. The pure mana surged towards the space in the surroundings like a tangible substance. Although it was not composed into any magic, it still had shocking power. Seeing Lin Li appear above the team, Archbishop Martin and the rest couldn't help but feel invigorated, and they were thrilled to see the changes that occurred in Lord Devourer. Although they did not know what exactly Lin Li had done to Lord Devourer, they could tell that it was definitely having some issues. Yes, there was indeed something wrong with Lord Devourer's body, and the reason for it was the potion that Lin Li had thrown into its mouth. When Lin Li was fighting against the elemental dragons, projected avatar in the Ga mountain range, he had once used the heart-piercing potion, which not only caused him to lose all of his mana, but also allowed him to create a terrifying magic forbidding domain. The magic forbidding domain was precisely the reason that the elemental dragon projected avatar lost its combat power, and was almost hammered to death. However, this time, instead of taking it himself, Lin Li gave the heart-piercing potion to Lord Devourer. After all, Lin Li had experienced the pain of losing all of his mana once, and that was enough for him. Back then, he only used the heart-piercing potion because he could not give it to the elemental dragon. However, the gap between Lord Devourer's giant jaws was large enough for a small potion bottle to pass through even when it was closed. Why would Lin Li bother suffering himself? In fact, when Lin Li was exploring the Well of the Sun back in the Endless World, he managed to kill Lord Devourer with the heart-piercing potion. This time, he did not expect himself to come to the Well of the Sun again to encounter Lord Devourer. Otherwise, he would have prepared the heart-piercing potion instead of going through the trouble of making one on the spot. Previously, he did not gain much from the fight with Lord Devourer, but the more important purpose was to determine if Lord Devourer that he encountered now was exactly the same as the one in the Endless World. As soon as the heart-piercing potion was poured into Lord Devourer's mouth, the strong medicinal effect had already exploded quickly in its body before it could even use the nomological power of disintegration. By now, it wouldn't work anymore. Under the effects of the heart-piercing potion, the mana that Lord Devourer had devoured for thousands of years was suddenly freed from its shackles. The total amount of mana that Lord Devourer devoured was much larger than what ordinary sanctuary powerhouses had. Now that it was suddenly released, it actually became a mana tide. The principle behind the magical crystal cannon was also a simple release of mana that was just like an implosion of a sanctuary powerhouse. Although it was less intense, it would be no exaggeration to say that the power it contained was earth-shattering. The substantial mana outside the barrier, which looked like massive waves that were stirred up in the sea of the storm, was continuously surging towards the light and darkness barrier with loud roars. The members of the expedition that were being shrouded in the light and darkness barrier were completely dumbfounded at this point. They had never seen something like that before in their lives. In comparison, those abyssal demons outside the light and darkness barrier were far more unfortunate than the members of the expedition. In the mana tide, all sorts of abyssal demons would crumble like sand sculptures that had been washed away by the sea in the blink of an eye. Regardless of how strong their bodies were, they would turn into the smallest particles of the world and disappear. Looking at everything that happened to the abyssal demons, the members of the expedition could not help but secretly feel fortunate. Fortunately, Lin Li had returned to the spot in the sky above the expedition in time, and used holy light and gloomy dark to form a barrier of light and darkness that covered the members of the expedition. Otherwise, except him, even the powerhouses that were at the peak of the legendary realm would struggle to survive in the magic tide. The mana flooded the entire space endlessly, and even the golden light emitted by the palace turned into a peculiar color because of the mana that almost condensed and turned into a substance. The amazing mana tide lasted for a long time before fading away. At this moment, the originally ferocious and menacing Lord Devourer's bloated and huge body had completely slumped to the ground, looking like a revolting puddle of rotten meat. It looked nothing like what it was before. Upon sight of this, the members of the expedition finally breathed a sigh of relief. Clearly, Lord Devourer had already been killed. When Lin Li put away the light and darkness barrier, and the others in the expedition had received signals that told them that they were safe, they sat on the ground one after another. Even peak legendary powerhouses like Donald and Archbishop Martin could no longer be bothered about their image and gentlemanliness. They just wanted to sit down and catch their breath. The pressure from Lord Devourer's attacks just now was so massive that it caused the expedition to feel like breathing freely was an enjoyable privilege now. However, while they were resting, Archbishop Martin and the others couldn't help but look over the team. They couldn't imagine what Lin Li had done to Lord Devourer. Could it be that he had really killed Lord Devourer, which had power that was comparable to that of a sanctuary powerhouse, with just a small bottle of potion? However, at this moment, Lin Li did not land on the ground. Instead, he moved quickly and arrived next to Lord Devourer, that was no longer showing any signs of life. Seeing this scene, Archbishop Martin and the others were even more puzzled. They wondered, could it be that there is some special value in the corpse of Lord Devourer? Although Archbishop Martin and the others knew nothing about the origins of Lord Devourer, it was, after all, a horrifying existence that was comparable to a sanctuary powerhouse in terms of strength. Putting aside the value of its corpse, its magical crystal that contained infinite mana alone was probably far more valuable than ordinary legendary magical crystals. However, at the thought of this, they couldn't help but think about the scene that happened just now. According to the amount of mana that was released, even if Lord Devourer had left its magical crystal behind, the mana in it had probably been depleted long ago. Of course, they were just curious. Regardless of the value of the corpse of Lord Devourer, there was nothing about Lin Li's behavior that the members of the expedition were displeased with. After all, Lord Devourer was destroyed by Lin Li's potion. When Lin Li arrived in front of Lord Devourer's corpse, a light and darkness sword immediately condensed and appeared above Lin Li's head as expected. Next, he pointed at the pile of rotten meat, and the light and darkness sword landed on it, with an earth-shattering whistle. Lord Devourer's body, which initially could withstand attacks from the light and darkness sword, had already lost its defensive ability at this moment. It was split in two under the attack. In fact, Lord Devourer's powerful defense came from the crystal armor that was formed outside its body with magical crystals, which the mana that Lord Devourer had devoured had been condensed into. However, after being fed the heart-piercing potion by Lin Li, the mana in his body lost its restraints, and the layer of magical crystals naturally disappeared too. Seeing that Lin Li had actually dissected the corpse of Lord Devourer, Archbishop Martin and the others from the expedition scurried over curiously too. However, in order to avoid letting Lin Li get the wrong idea, they did not directly surround the corpse, and instead kept a certain distance from it. Faced with Lin Li, a sanctuary powerhouse, they wouldn't dare to covet anything despite the temptation of the artifact. In fact, they even had to worry about whether or not they would be able to get their hands on the target items of their exploration. Lin Li was not bothered by the arrival of Archbishop Martin and the others. Instead, he hung the light and darkness sword over Lord Devourer's corpse, after which he coldly said, "If you still refuse to come out, I'll grind you and your corpse up." Hearing this, Archbishop Martin and the others were even more confused. They thought, hasn't Lord Devourer already died? Who is Masterful speaking to now, then? However, when they were confused, they suddenly saw an orb the size of a human's fist writhing in the dissected corpse. However, it looked just like an orb compared to the sheer size of Lord Devourer's body. After it writhed for a while, a ball of blood and tissue emerged from the hole, followed by a strange thing. That thing was not much bigger than a human fist, and was about the same size as the young elemental worm Xiaohua, though not as adorable. It had a large head, but that was of course only relative to the rest of its body. Its head alone took up half of its figure. It had a pair of beady eyes. It did not have a nose, and its mouth took up half of its head, on which there were two short horns. The skin on its body was wrinkly and stained with the blood of the corpse. It looked extremely disgusting, and its limbs were still as dry and thin as twigs. They looked like they could not support its fist-sized body at all. Archbishop Martin and the others would never have thought that such an ugly thing would emerge from the body of Lord Devourer. However, the origin of this thing was unknown to them, just like that of Lord Devourer. However, when that thing appeared, Archbishop Martin and the others still kept their guard up, and got into a vigilant stance unanimously. After all, it had come out of Lord Devourer's body, and God knew what dreadful dangers were hidden beneath its hideous appearance. It was Lin Li's second time seeing that thing, so he naturally did not have any special expression. He pointed a finger, and the light and darkness sword, which cut open the body of Lord Devourer, moved above the head of the ugly creature, hovering around it like it would slash downwards at any moment. The moment the light and darkness sword approached, the thing let out a near-piercing shriek, and a portion of consciousness was transmitted into Lin Li's mind at the same time. Don't kill me. I'm just a parasitic demon on the body of Lord Devourer. Don't you want treasures? I can tell you where the treasures are hidden in this place. The thing begged Lin Li for mercy, and offered a deal that almost no one would be able to refuse. Even those who did not know that this gilded and opulent palace used to be the Sun Palace of the High Elves would definitely be able to tell what was extraordinary about this palace. There was probably no one who thought that there really wasn't a single thing of value here. Moreover, as long as there were treasures, they would definitely not be treasures in the ordinary sense. They would definitely exceed one's imagination in terms of value. People would die for money, while birds would die for food, and when faced with the temptation of treasure, it would be hard for both humans and demons not to be tempted. Otherwise, who would take such a great risk to come to such a place? Hence, the deal that the hideous thing offered was irresistibly tempting. Unfortunately, Lin Li was not one of the vast majority, and although the treasure was just as tempting to him, the temptation would not exist if one knew that the treasure was nothing. Lin Li had explored the Well of the Sun before, so his understanding of it was probably greater than that of the ugly thing in front of him, and if there really had been any treasure here, he would have gone to get it himself long ago. Parasitic demon, you are indeed a parasite, but I'm afraid Lord Devourer was the one, being a parasite to this poor fellow. Faced with the deal offered by the other party, Lin Li simply ignored it with disdain. There was a tinge of coldness in his consciousness. What are you saying? I don't understand. The ugly thing did not panic because of Lin Li's words, and showed some bewilderment instead. Although it might be able to fool others with its behavior, it did not work on Lin Li, who had killed Lord Devourer once. Lin Li was not making any guesses, but rather was extremely certain that the ugly thing in front of him was the true Lord Devourer, and the dissected corpse was actually just a poor fellow, which became the host to the parasite. In fact, it was thanks to the fact that the endless world was a game. Otherwise, Lin Li wouldn't have associated the ugly thing in front of him with the ferocious Lord Devourer. When he was exploring the Well of the Sun in the endless world, Lin Li had killed Lord Devourer, but he did not immediately get the system notification that he had killed it successfully. Initially, he thought that Lord Devourer was feigning its death, and so began bombarding the corpse some more, but to his surprise, he managed to force the thing inside to come out. He finally discovered the true identity of Lord Devourer that way. In fact, that huge, bloated body was just a walking corpse that was a host to the parasitic Lord Devourer, which was the ugly thing that looked like it could be blown away in a single breath. Its original body was actually the devouring demon from the endless abyss, a parasite that all demons abhorred. The devouring demon itself was actually very weak, and if it didn't rely on parasitizing the bodies of other high demons, it would probably belong to the lowest level of existence in the endless abyss. They could only gradually take over the bodies of their hosts that were superior demons in order to grow into a Lord Devourer. However, not all devouring demons had the opportunity to become Lord Devourers, as the process involved a lot of coincidences and special characteristics. Otherwise, the entire abyss would have become a world of devouring demons long ago. It was definitely difficult to occupy the body of a high demon. With the devouring demon's strength, it might be killed by the mana waves emitted by the magical crystal of the high demon even if it occupied a corpse. However, once the devouring demon succeeded in occupying the high demon's body, it would begin devouring a large amount of various types of power, from intangible magical elements to various tangible ores, which would be decomposed and transformed into energy as long as they landed in the mouths of the devouring demons. While devouring and absorbing the energy, they would also use the energy to transform the host body by strengthening every aspect of the bodies of the high demons that were already strong in the first place. It was akin to building its own castle, eventually transforming the body into something completely different that would grow into a terrifying existence that even ancient demons would have to avoid. Although a devouring demon that had lost its host would no longer have terrifying strength that was comparable to the sanctuary realm, Lin Li would not waste his time on meaningless things. Lin Li was very clear that even though this devouring demon Garl had already become extremely small and weak, it could still regain the power that it had in the beginning. Although the devouring demon Garl could not match the young elemental Wyrm Xiaohua in terms of quick spell casting, they seemed to be on par in terms of strength. However, the ability to devour every attack that came its way in one bite that the devouring demon Garl possessed was something that Xiaohua lacked. Lin Li had actually already thought about it back when he first dealt with the Lord Devourer. However, in the Well of the Sun in the Endless World, Lin Li ended up killing the devouring demon with a single arrow, after forcing it out mainly because there was no way he could make it his pet as a hunter. After all, no matter how lax the rules were in the Endless World, it was just a game. However, things were different now. Anril was a real world that did not have as many rigid restrictions as the game world. Thus, it was possible for the idea that Lin Li once had to come true. Seeing that the devouring demon Garl was still feigning ignorance, Lin Li pressed the light and darkness sword that hovered over its head downwards. The light and darkness sword even cut a small slit in the top of Garl's head. Afterward, Lin Li coldly said to Garl via his mental strength, "Cease your tricks. You only have two options. You either submit or die." Sensing the cold killing intent transmitted through the mental strength, the weak devouring demon Garl shivered slightly. However, the choice that Garl made was the exact opposite of what he feared. It was as if he would rather die than give in. He said, "You just kill me. I, the Lord Devourer, will never be a slave to a human." Since he had already been exposed, Garl naturally did not have to hide anything. However, that did not mean that he was not really afraid of death. In fact, he knew very well that when someone was given the choice between death and something else, the person who issued the choice actually wanted the other option to be chosen. The reason and logic were simple, but it also showed how valuable he was in Lin Li's eyes. The fact that Lin Li was not actually willing to kill him easily meant that there was room for negotiation. However, it was obvious that Garl did not understand Lin Li's means. He showed his unwillingness to submit to increase his value, but he did not realize that he was actually facing a human who was more terrifying than a demon. After hearing Garl's answer, a look of mockery appeared on Lin Li's face. He said, "It's not that simple to die. As a demon, you should know that in fact, in many cases, Death is actually a relief instead. Garl was just about to say something to show that he had a backbone, but he sensed a wave of power being violently infused into the top of his head. The power did not seem to have any effect on his body, but it surged directly into his soul. Garl immediately felt like his soul had been dropped into a wok of hot oil, as it was overwhelmed with an excruciating and unbearable burning pain. That was actually just the pure purification of the holy light. If not for the fact that Garl's soul wasn't very strong, Lin Li wouldn't mind letting him experience the feeling of his soul getting burned by the celestial purification fire, like what he had done to the fire demon king in the past. Of course, compared to the celestial purification fire, the purification power of holy light was actually not weak, it just was not as explosive. Garl was still waiting for Lin Li to name his conditions so that he could bargain with him, but to his surprise, Lin Li was more tyrannical than he had imagined. Lin Li did not plan to negotiate at all. However, at this moment, Garl was suffering from the endless pain in his soul that was being tormented by the purification power, and he wanted to ask Lin Li stop, but it was too late. Although Archbishop Martin and the others behind Lin Li didn't know exactly what Lin Li intended to do and what he had done to the ugly thing, they were also greatly shocked by the sudden shriek that came from the soul, even though they saw that the ugly thing was still standing properly under the light and darkness sword. They all knew that it was suffering from unimaginable pain and torment. After only a few seconds, Lin Li withdrew the purification power, but to Garl, those several seconds felt as long as hundreds of years. As the powerful Lord Devourer, Garl had never been through such torment before. This time, it was definitely a memorable experience. Can you tell me your choice now? Lin Li's words once again appeared in Garl's mind. Although Lin Li's tone was calm, Garl nonetheless shuddered involuntarily as he recalled the excruciating pain in his soul just now. Lin Li was truly the demon of demons. However, was he really going to be a slave to a human? He thought about the freedom and the lofty feeling he enjoyed as a Lord Devourer on the one hand, and the lowliness he would be reduced to after becoming a slave and having his life and freedom mastered by others on the other. Although Garl did not want to experience the pain he had just felt again, the huge difference between a Lord Devourer and a slave of a human still made him very hesitant. It seems like you haven't recognized the situation that you're in yet. Lin Li did not have that much patience to waste on Garl. Seeing that Garl did not give him an answer immediately, he mobilized his mental strength again and infused the purification power into Garl's body. In fact, Garl was just about to open his mouth to discuss the terms of submission, to ask for better treatment from Lin Li, but to his surprise, Lin Li was actually so impatient. In the end, because of his hesitation, his soul was in flames again, and due to the fact that he took a breather in between, the agony and pain became even more intense. However, at this point, there was no longer any point in regretting. Amidst the burning pain in his soul, Garl could not spare a single bit of his mental strength to convey his intentions to Lin Li. The pain lasted for a few more seconds. Some kinds of pain would make one turn numb after some time, but the pain of the soul was something that could be felt clearly all the time. After a few seconds, Lin Li finally stopped and did not ask Garl any more questions. He simply looked at Garl coldly. Actually, Lin Li had already sensed from the fluctuation in Garl's soul just now that the latter was giving in, but he did not give Garl the chance to speak at all, because he was very sure that he could not be kind at all when dealing with demons like the Lord Devourer. If he wanted to deal with it, he had to make sure that the demon was completely subdued, otherwise the demon would still not be serious about working for him even if he was subdued. This time, Lin Li didn't ask any questions, but Garl did not dare to delay anymore. He quickly told Lin Li using his mental strength, "Wait, human mage, can we talk things over calmly?" "Talk? What right do you have to talk to me? Don't forget, you are now my prisoner." Lin Li had taught Garl a memorable lesson through the power of purification, but he knew that he could not use that method too much. Even though Garl was the Lord Devourer, his soul was nowhere near the original Fire Demon King's soul and strength. If he were to do it a few more times, then even if he didn't completely purify his soul, he would drive Garl crazy. That was not what Lin Li wanted. "Yes, I am your prisoner, and my life is in your hands. However, instead of killing me, you want me to submit to you. You should be a little interested in my abilities." While saying that, Garl carefully checked Lin Li's expression, and when he said those words, Lin Li's brows moved a little. He quickly changed his tone and said, "Wait, I can submit to you, but I want the contract between us to be beneficial to both of us. If you must make me your slave, then I'd rather be tortured to the point where my soul dissipates than give in." After all, Garl had once been the Lord Devourer, and making him submit was akin to making an emperor in a human kingdom become a slave to someone else all of a sudden. It was indeed something that was more painful than death. Hence, despite having been tortured twice, Garl still raised such a request. Of course, Garl did not want to experience the pain of having his soul purified again, but if he, the hallowed Lord Devourer, had to become a slave, it would be a torture worse than death. Besides, Garl knew very well that since Lin Li did not kill him immediately, it meant that he was still of some value to the latter. Hence, the torture was just a form of coercion, and he believed that Lin Li would not want to torture himself until his soul dissipated. Of course, Garl knew that Lin Li definitely had a bottom line. As long as he did not cross it, things would still be negotiable, but if he did, death would probably be inevitable. Submitting was undoubtedly the bottom line, but there seemed to be room for negotiation regarding the terms of his surrender. There was a hierarchy among subordinates too. For example, among the group of abyssal demons under Garl, some were only meant for being cannon fodder and food, while others could get some degree of power and status. You want me to submit to you because of your following exploration, right? I can agree to submit to you, but I also want you to promise to give me back my freedom after you leave this place. Garl stated the conditions that he had thought through thoroughly. In his opinion, that was the most suitable. He felt that Lin Li clearly wanted him to submit because of the exploration of the palace. Once that was over, they would naturally go their separate ways. However, how could Lin Li let go of a slave with such a special ability? Garl's devouring force was not only useful for this place. In the future, Lin Li would be going to seal the Spastime Rift, which would inevitably involve battles with strong enemies. If he could have a combat force like the Lord Devourer, it would definitely save him plenty of effort. Moreover, Garl, who had lost his host, was currently not able to play much of a role in the Well of the Sun at all, and it would not be in Lin Li's interest at all to restore his freedom after leaving. Hence, Lin Li decided to make Garl his servant forever, like Ufalusi and Norfaler. However, Lin Li could also see that despite the memorable torture he had just subjected Garl to, it was clearly not an easy task to get the other party to submit and agree to be a servant forever. It was also an issue of the bottom line. No matter how greedy one might be, there would always be a bottom line, or a measure of value between life and death. Garl, how can you benefit the exploration of this place? Besides, even if I let you go, I'm afraid all those demons that used to have scruples about your power and abilities would probably come to kill you as soon as they can. It may be great to have freedom, but you can only enjoy freedom if you live on forever. The mental strength of a third person suddenly joined the conversation between Lin Li and Garl. Who is it? Garl suddenly realized that someone else in the human team recognized him after being called out by his name. I just changed my body, and you don't recognize me. It turned out that it was Khanorus who had spoken. As a former ancient demon deity and a demon lord, who mastered conspiracy and deception, Khanorus had dealt with demon lords at all levels of the abyss during the millions of years he had lived in the endless abyss, and although he couldn't say that they were all close to him, he was at least familiar with them. Hence, Garl quickly recognized Khanorus through the mental strength fluctuations, which surprised him. Although Garl did not know Khanorus' identity of an ancient demon deity, he knew that Khanorus had always been a sly and scheming existence that had never taken enough advantage in the endless abyss. All of the demon lords Khanorus had dealt with had suffered great losses. Now that such an existence had appeared in the human team, Garl was truly shocked as it was beyond his imagination. Khanorus, why are you here? Did you lie and coax these humans to come here? After recognizing Khanorus, Garl subconsciously asked about this based on his knowledge of the past. That was also enough to reflect how infamous Khanorus was in the endless abyss. No, I'm just following my master, who is here to explore. Khanorus usually would not address Lin Li as his master, and although they had a contract between them, it was different from a slave-like contract. However, Khanorus knew that Lin Li wanted to subdue Garl, so he specifically highlighted his master-servant relationship with Lin Li this time to display it to Garl. Garl was in greater disbelief after hearing Khanorus' words. He could not believe that a cunning and malicious existence like Khanorus would actually acknowledge a human as his master. Khanorus naturally knew what Garl would think after hearing this, so he continued, "There's nothing to be surprised about. Master Falik is not an ordinary human. Look at me now. This body of mine is the perfect body that the High Elven High Lord Osric had specially prepared for himself. If I had not acknowledged my master and followed him, I wouldn't have gotten it." Osric had once led his magic legion from the first level of the abyss all the way to the deepest depths, killing countless demon lords. To the demons of the endless abyss, he was just like their nightmare. Hence, in the endless abyss, Osric was a terrifying legend that was even more famous than the legendary ancient demons who created the endless abyss. The perfect body that Osric had created for himself. Garl's beady eyes immediately glistened with thirst when he heard Khanorus' words. Although Khanorus had a bad reputation for being scheming and sly, there were still many who often got tricked by him, because Khanorus' lies were never purely lies. In fact, what he said was more true than anything else, but if one were to do as he said, they would inevitably fall into his trap. The most terrifying lies were partial truths that were 1% lie and 99% truth. It could be said that on the one hand, Connorus was a liar, and on the other, he was extremely credible. That was a well-known fact to almost every demon in the endless abyss. Hence, despite finding Connorus' words to be unimaginable, Garl did not suspect it at all. Besides, he could also feel that Connorus' body contained a very terrifying and destructive force. Is this the reason that you're willing to lose your freedom and become a servant of a human? Garl had a very strong desire for a powerful body as well, but there seemed to be some hesitation in giving up his freedom for it. What's wrong with that? My master may be a human, but he has even more potential than Osric and might be able to reach the heights of the immortal king in the future. What's wrong with submitting to a master like him? Connorus boasted on Lin Li's behalf without feeling ashamed at all. Of course, it was not actually boasting, even though it might sound so to others. Garl was still not too trusting of Connorus' words. I admit, he is indeed powerful, but saying that he is comparable to Osric or the immortal king is a stretch. You're bragging too much, aren't you? What do you know? My master may be human, but he managed to step into the sanctuary realm in his early 20s. Is this something Osric can compare to? I'm afraid even the immortal king might not have been able to achieve this. Since Connorus had mentioned Lin Li and his master-servant relationship, he had to put Lin Li on a pedestal, otherwise, he would seem too embarrassing. What? Although he had already seen that Lin Li had a young face, Garl also knew that it was actually very easy for a sanctuary powerhouse to change his appearance. However, most sanctuary powerhouses generally wouldn't care about such things. He did not even consider whether Lin Li was really that young. After all, it was not easy to enter the sanctuary realm. Even if he was as talented as a high elf, he would still need at least a few hundred years of accumulation. Therefore, when he heard that Lin Li was only in his early 20s, Garl was incredibly shocked. A sanctuary powerhouse who was in his 20s was indeed not something that Osric could compare to. Perhaps he could really reach the immortal king's level of accomplishments. In fact, while finding out about this piece of news, Garl had already subconsciously reduced his resistance to submitting to Lin Li. Connorus' strategy was exactly to compare Lin Li to the immortal king. Who would feel ashamed of being the immortal king's servant? Enough, Connorus, since he doesn't agree, there's no need for us to waste time here. After Lin Li said that, he pointed his hand and raised the light and darkness sword, after which it landed on Garl's head. Wait, I agree, but we can only sign a master-servant contract. After being frightened by Lin Li, the tiny bit of hesitation left in Garl immediately vanished. He frantically expressed his intention to submit. The master-servant contract that Garl mentioned was the kind that Lin Li and Connorus had signed. Although there was a certain restraint, the servant would still enjoy a relative amount of freedom. For example, if Lin Li, the master, were to die, Garl, the servant, would definitely be affected, but he would not die together with Lin Li. Hearing Garl's call to stop, Lin Li stopped the light and darkness sword and looked at Connorus. Connorus, you will decide the contents of the contract. Connorus accepted the order and smiled faintly. Soon, he handed a contract to Garl. Faced with the danger of death, Garl's mind was already in a mess and he was flustered. Although he carefully checked every term of the contract, he did not have the energy to study it. Hence, following the terms of the contract provided by Connorus, Garl siphoned a portion of his soul brand and accepted the contract. However, to Garl's surprise, the situation changed after he sent out his soul brand in recognition of Lin Li as his master. According to regular master-servant contracts, the master should similarly attach a wisp of soul brand to the contract in order to make it complete. However, Lin Li did not do that. Instead, he directly removed Garl's soul brand in the contract and confined it with his mental strength. It was no longer a master-servant contract, but an actual soul contract. No matter how silly Garl might be, he understood at this point that he had been fooled by Connorus. However, he could no longer change the situation. No matter how displeased Garl was, there was no way he could snap at this time. Besides, with his soul brand being controlled by someone else, he would not be able to die even if he wanted to. Lin Li would no longer have to use the purification power to deal with him. Garl was not a stubborn person anyway. Under such circumstances, he naturally wouldn't bring himself trouble. He had no choice but to bite the bullet and bear with it. Don't be dissatisfied. Fulik wouldn't take in a useless person. In the future, he might even find a stronger host for you to become a parasite too, and stepping into the sanctuary realm won't be that unattainable. When Connorus was in the endless abyss in the past, he seemed to have been taken advantage of by the Lord Devourer. Now that he had done Garland, he was extremely smug. Master Fulik, at this moment, Archbishop Martin and the others who had been waiting at the back finally couldn't help but step forward. The conversation they had and the signing of the contract were all done through spiritual communication. Hence, Archbishop Martin and the others were rather confused because they did not know what Lin Li had just done. Everything's fine now, Archbishop Martin, sorry to have kept you waiting. Lin Li did not say much, and directly dispersed the light and darkness sword before turning around to return to the expedition. Seeing this, Archbishop Martin and the others realized that Lin Li had obviously subdued that ugly thing, otherwise he wouldn't have let it go so easily. However, they could not imagine how that ugly thing could be of use. Seeing that Lin Li didn't want to explain, Archbishop Martin and the others didn't ask any further questions. They simply looked at Garl and sized him up with peculiar looks, before returning to the team with Lin Li. Although Garl had lost his host and the powerful strength that was comparable to the sanctuary realm, the heart-piercing potion did not have any effects on his body. He still had power that was near the peak of the legendary level. Hence, after seeing that Lin Li and the others were heading to the expedition, he immediately cast the power of flight and hovered behind Lin Li. It couldn't be helped. A servant had to be conscious and alert enough. Garl had no choice but to submit to fate now. He only hoped that his human master really had great potential like Connorus had said, and would one day be able to reach the heights that the immortal king had climbed to. However, what no one expected was that after Garl followed Lin Li to the expedition, the people did not react strangely because of his appearance. Instead, Angelano, who was dressed in strange armor, suddenly scurried towards them. Devouring demon, how dare you appear in front of Lord Angelano? Watch me crush you into powder. Angelano actually recognized Garl, and glared at him like they had a major feud with each other. He swung his large metal hammer, and looked like he really wanted to smash Garl into pieces. Garl was no longer the Lord Devourer. However, he still had power that was near the peak of the legendary level. How could he be hit by Angelano's hammer easily? After casting the power of flight, his body flashed, and he dodged the hammer that was being swung at him. He screamed, and said, I was just wondering why I smelled this stench from afar. It turns out that this disgusting race, from back then still has a remaining descendant here. Although Angelano's entire body was wrapped in armor, it was clear that Garl had somewhat recognized him. Besides, judging from his words, he seemed to have some feud with the goblins. Besides, it might be a major one. Even Lin Li was a little surprised at this behavior of the two of them, not to mention Archbishop Martin and the others. The goblins had created civilization in the era before the High Elves appeared, but that era was also very short, and there was barely any historical record left behind. On the other hand, the devouring demon was actually very mysterious in the endless abyss, and no one knew how many devouring demons there were left in the endless abyss. Hence, be it from a personal consideration or a racial consideration, no one would think that Angelano and Garl were related in any way. What's the big deal about flying? Go ahead and fly. Seeing that Garl had flown up into the air, Angelano immediately raised his arm, and an alchemy array on the armor of his arm suddenly lit up. A fire snake then charged towards Garl immediately. Garl, who was flying in the air, did not dodge, and instead dealt with the fire snake. He suddenly opened his mouth, and sucked it in, just like the alchemy colossuses and abyssal demons that the Lord Devourer had devoured previously. Garl sucked in the fire snake launched by Angelano. Garl deliberately burped, and looked down at Angelano in disdain. Is that all you have? It's not even enough to fill the gaps in my teeth. Is that so? I shall make you the first devouring demon to die from being too stuffed. Angelano tossed his hammer while chanting something, all ready to summon his alchemy colossus. However, at this moment, Lin Li reached his hand out and patted Angelano's head. He said, enough. Angelano, I don't care what problems you have with each other, but it's best to save them all for later. We don't have time for you to cause a stir now. Flick, why did you take him as a servant? Devouring demons are inherently treacherous, scheming, and sly. They're the most shameless and despicable. They don't deserve to exist in this world at all, Angelano said in displeasure. However, he had also stopped summoning the alchemy colossus. Really? How much better are you people? If I remember correctly, I'm afraid you're the only one left of your race. See, it's proven whose race doesn't deserve a place in this world. Garl rebutted Angelano in a sharp voice as he descended. And you, don't tell me that you devouring demons have taken over the abyss. I'm afraid you're the only disgusting one left in the entire abyss now. Besides, I believe it won't be long before you devouring demons are completely finished. Angelano was rather hostile too. He swung his arms and sounded extremely threatening. Lin Li's new and old subordinates falling out was not something to be proud of. Archbishop Martin and the others were too embarrassed to keep watching, so they greeted Lin Li, and they went back to their teams to arrange for recuperation without waiting for a response. Looking at the strange gazes that were constantly cast at him by the people nearby, Lin Li rubbed his forehead helplessly, but he had no choice but to make Garl shut up using soul restraint. Finally, the two of them quieted down. However, he could still notice the intense animosity in Garl's and Angelano's eyes when they were looking at each other. It was as if they were fighting with each other using their eyes. What exactly is going on here? After looking at the two of them who were fighting intensely, Lin Li turned to look at Connors helplessly. Among those present, Connors, who was once an ancient demon deity, was probably the only one who knew what had happened between the goblins and the devouring demons. However, Connors was not an omniscient, omnipotent god. He would only try to find out more about things that he felt interested in, participate in them, and then record them. After all, he had already existed for millions of years. How could he possibly record every single thing that had happened during those long years? Hence, regarding this matter, Connors could only tell Lin Li vaguely that the annihilation of the goblins seemed to have some connection with the devouring demons. Rumor had it that the reason that the devouring demons gradually became extinct in the abyss was because the goblins had resorted to some means. In short, Angelano and Garl were the only ones who knew the exact reason. Perhaps they might not be clear, either. Lin Li knew that there was a huge feud between the two of them that was related to race. That matter was a real headache for Lin Li. If the members of his team did not get along with each other, it could be considered an extremely troublesome thing for the expedition. In particular, Angelano and Lin Li did not have any contract with each other. He only stayed in the Tower of Dusk because Lin Li could provide him with enough materials for his alchemy research. However, Lin Li was not sure if he could let Angelano work with his enemy willingly based on that alone. However, it was clearly not the time to resolve this problem now. Lin Li could only use the soul contract to restrain Garl while persuading Angelano. He painstakingly managed to get Angelano to agree not to argue with Garl for the time being. In fact, the main reason Angelano agreed to Lin Li's request was that he had heard that Garl had signed a soul contract with Lin Li and had become Lin Li's slave. Angelano was like a guest of the Tower of Dusk, and more specifically, Lin Li's guest. He was on equal terms with Lin Li. Hence, Angelano's status was naturally higher than Lin Li's slaves. Garl's. You're just a slave. I can't be bothered to argue with you now. When we go out later, I'll settle the scores with you, Angelano said to Garl in a disdainful tone. Garl was not annoyed to hear this. Instead, he said to Connors, "Did you hear that, Connors? He said that we're just slaves and not even worthy of talking to him." Garl was initially displeased about Connors lying to him, but after hearing Angelano's words, he immediately got Connors involved. However, as the ancient demon deity who mastered deception and conspiracy, how could Connors have failed to tell what Garl was thinking? He nonchalantly said, "Slave, I think you're mistaken. Slaves and servants are very different." Connors and Lin Li had signed a master-servant contract, and although he was also restrained from betrayal, he still had a relatively great amount of freedom. For example, if Connors had not wanted to come to the Sky Castle this time, Lin Li could not really have forced him. If Lin Li died unexpectedly, Connors wouldn't die together with him like he would if he were in a soul contract with Lin Li, although he would suffer some damage to his soul. As expected, Connors' response made Garl grit his teeth in anger. He was the one who caused Garl to sign a soul contract with Lin Li. However, Garl was well aware that he had to suck it up since he was in his current situation. If he were to argue with them, he would only be bringing trouble to himself. However, Garl had allies too. After connecting with Lin Li's soul, he quickly sensed that both Ufalusi and Norfaler had Lin Li's aura on them. Hence, he immediately flew to Ufalusi and Norfaler and tried to forge a friendship with them. Seeing the look of confusion on Angelano's face, Lin Li shook his head and said, "This is not a simple burning sun flame god, but the Gate of Sunfall." The Gate of Sunfall was usually seen as a burning sun flame god magic trap, but if one were to just take it as that and try to crack it, it would probably trigger a black hole hidden beneath it that would devour everything. It was truly a horrifying existence that even deities would not dare to touch. When Lin Li was exploring the Well of the Sun in the Endless World in the past, he had suffered a great loss right in the face of the Gate of Sunfall, and almost dropped his hunter equipment set. Although he later escaped the gravitational pull of the black hole, he lost his superior grade hunter pet, which he had raised for a long time. The Shadow Leopard. Someone had once offered him 10,000 yuan for the Shadow Leopard, which had excellent growth stats, but he could not bear to sell it. If he had not got the Stars of Fury and the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars that he coveted, he probably would have wanted to cry to death. This time, if the Gate of Sunfall was accidentally triggered, no one in the entire expedition team would be able to escape except for Lin Li. Even Lin Li had needed the power of the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars in order to escape. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape the fate of falling. The Gate of Sunfall. Angelano was so frightened when he heard that name that he broke out in a cold sweat. He could no longer care to bicker with Garl, and instead retreated again and again. Although the Gate of Sunfall was terrifying, at the end of the day, Lin Li had already had the experience of cracking it once. This time, he was completely confident that he would be able to break the trap smoothly. Hence, after pulling Angelano back, Lin Li stepped forward casually to approach the arch door. He did not feel the slightest tinge of nervousness at all. It was as if breaking the trap was an effortless thing for him, as he began to do so in a relaxed manner. Actually, the magic trap was just like a riddle set by the person who set it up. Those who could not guess it would never be able to disable it. But once they knew the answer, they would find that there was nothing difficult about it. If it had been Lin Li's first time cracking it, he would probably have still accidentally triggered the Gate of Sunfall, like he had in the Endless World, even if he had the attainments of a guru. Since he already knew about the existence of the Gate of Sunfall and how it would be triggered, however, the terrifying trap would not be a mystery to Lin Li. Lin Li smoothly and quickly cracked the trap in the arch door. He was so quick that it made the others think that the Burning Sun Flame God magic trap and the Gate of Sunfall were all false and non-existent. They were just exaggerations meant for scaring others. Of course, Lin Li was a sanctuary powerhouse, and the people of the expedition team would not doubt him. If he had been an insignificant figure, others might really have thought that way. Afterward, under Lin Li's orders, the expedition passed through the arch door smoothly and made their way up the steps behind. Soon, they arrived at the main entrance of the palace. This time, Lin Li did not purposely stop the team, but instead waved, and the two heavy-looking doors of the palace's main entrance opened slowly and silently from inside. There was a large space behind the gate, and the ground was also paved with golden tiles. It looked similar to the first floor of the Lord Devourer's area. As the gate was opened, there were random noises coming from all directions inside the palace. Soon, countless abyssal demons rushed in. Those abyssal demons might not be able to compare to the ones on the first floor, where the Lord Devourer was, but they were definitely superior in quality. All abyssal demons were at least level 20. On the first few floors of the abyss, they would be demon lords. However, the abyssal demons here were only minions. Seeing the massive influx of abyssal demons, the expedition immediately formed battle formations, and instantly got into a conflict with the legion of demons. Garl, can you parasitize these demons? Asked Lin Li, who immediately thought of Garl, who had lost his host when he saw the abyssal demons. A powerful host was absolutely mandatory for Garl to use his ability to devour everything. However, Lin Li was not quite certain about the conditions required for devouring demons to parasitize their target. In Garl's opinion, Ufalusi and Norfaler, who were legendary powerhouses who were at the peak of the legendary realm, had to have been duped by Connorus and Lin Li into signing the soul contract in the same manner. Since they were in the same boat, Garl naturally had to find a way to pull some connections he could use. However, Garl did not know that Ufalusi hadn't signed the soul contract under Lin Li's threat. In the past, Norfaler had voluntarily signed the blood oath with Lin Li. Meanwhile, Ufalusi had followed Lin Li for such a long time, and he even advanced from a lich that had just entered the legendary realm to one that was at the peak of that realm. He was just one step away from the sanctuary realm. How could he have any complaints? Hence, even though they were all considered servants in terms of their status, Ufalusi and Norfaler did not treat Garl as one of them. Moreover, everyone had just been harmed terribly by the Lord Devourer. It would be strange if they treated Garl well now. Seeing how overboard and ridiculous Garl was getting, Ufalusi immediately pushed him away with a magic spell, and Norfaler even drew the Heaven's Wrath dagger. After several failed attempts, Garl finally calmed down and understood that the dynamics of the relationship between the members of the team did not seem to be what he thought they were. After a period of recuperation, the expedition finally set out again. However, after the battle with the Lord Devourer, the teams from the Brilliant Shrine and the Rotterdam Kingdom suffered major losses. Although the recuperation had allowed them to recover, their morale was significantly lower. The expedition entered the Lord Devourer's palace and found a gate in the depths. There was a spiral staircase that led upwards to a golden light in the distance on the other side of the gate. Upon sight of this, Archbishop Martin and the others could not help but look worried, because this was clearly different from the gates in the previous worlds that they had left. It was just a staircase that led to a higher level. On the first floor, they had encountered a powerful enemy like the Lord Devourer, causing the teams of the Brilliant Shrine and the Rotterdam to suffer huge damage. At the thought of this, everyone would definitely be terrified. Archbishop Martin and the rest had no choice but to once again turn their attention to Lin Li, the young sanctuary powerhouse. There will no longer be enemies like the Lord Devourer on the upper level. As long as we're careful, there should not be any major casualties. Lin Li really did not disappoint Archbishop Martin and the others. In fact, after making sure that this place was exactly the same as the Well of the Sun of the Endless World, he was already certain of the situation on the floor above. Subduing Garl was actually just giving him a good excuse to explain that, although he could choose not to, but that would certainly not be convincing in the long run. Hearing Lin Li's statement, Archbishop Martin and the others finally secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If they had to go through that kind of battle a few more times, there would probably be nothing much left of their teams in the end. They did not doubt Lin Li's statement. After all, Lin Li had just subdued a demon, and it was only right that he would know what was going on here. The expedition passed through the gate and walked up the long staircase, all the way to the endless golden light in the distance. After walking for about an hour, they finally saw the silhouette of a majestic building at the end of their line of sight, and it was gradually becoming clearer in the endless golden light. At this moment, the expedition finally realized that the place where they had just fought the Lord Devourer was actually just a small corner of the palace. Yet, they were terribly shocked. In fact, the moment they saw it, they almost worshipped it. Clearly, the majesty of the Sun Palace was truly beyond imaginable. When Lin Li arrived at the gate of the second floor, he waved his hands and gestured for the team to stop advancing. Even though they did not have orders from Archbishop Martin and Donald, the members from the Brilliant Shrine and the Rotterdam Kingdom already treated Lin Li as their supreme leader. They would follow his orders without hesitation. Archbishop Martin and Donald didn't have any complaints about the situation. Anyway, even if Lin Li did not give them direct commands, they would still go to him and ask him some questions, which would instead affect the team's execution efficiency. Well, Prince Canber from the Rotterdam Kingdom was rather upset about it, even though Donald kept persuading him. Of course, Lin Li did not take a little ant like Canber seriously. If Canber just followed them obediently, everything would be fine. However, if he were to jump out recalcitrantly and affect Lin Li's plans, Lin Li would kill him effortlessly. Prince Canber's identity meant nothing to a sanctuary powerhouse like Lin Li at all. If he were to really die because he had provoked a sanctuary powerhouses, the old king of Rotterdam Kingdom would have to stand out and apologize to him. Lin Li made the team stop not to show any authority, but rather because the journey was going to become tough from then on. Due to the existence of the Lord Devourer, Garl, the mana sources of the magic gears and magic traps around the palace were devoured together with the treasures. Hence, other than the battle with the abyssal demons, the expedition did not have to worry about other threats. However, it was different here. They were not in Garl's territory, and the mana sources of the magic traps were intact. Hence, it was not overboard to say that every step they took was dangerous. Although given Lin Li's attainments in this regard, those magic traps and gears would not pose much of a threat to him. The expedition would easily slip into danger if they did not follow his commands. Following Lin Li's orders, the expedition stopped on the staircase in front of the gate, and hundreds of people and the alchemy colossuses of the Rotterdam Kingdom formed a long line. It was a large gate that was extremely high, and even Angelano's alchemy colossus might not be able to reach the top with its arms raised. There were also realistic flame patterns carved on the arch door, and even the golden light that it emitted seemed to be influenced by the flame patterns, making the arch look like a rising sun. There was no obstruction in the middle of the arch door, and one would be able to tell at a glance that there was still a flight of steps that extended to the main entrance of the palace on the other side of the door. Hence, Archbishop Martin and the rest were somewhat curious about why Lin Li made them stop there. They wondered what kind of danger it contained. However, to Lin Li, a master of magic gears and magic traps, it had a completely different significance. The arch door was actually set up with a very terrifying magic trap, and once someone barged through recklessly, they would be immediately incinerated to ashes by the flames of the sun, just as if they really walked into the sun. Not to mention the legendary powerhouses, even a sanctuary powerhouse like Lin Li would be burned if he broke in. Garl, you can devour anything, can't you? Come on. If you have what it takes, devour this burning sun flame god magic trap now. Although Angelano promised Lin Li that he wouldn't settle the scores with Garl for the time being, that didn't stop him from verbally picking on Garl. Hearing Angelano's words, Garl did not even have time to respond before Archbishop Martin got a great fright. They finally discovered that there was a magic trap called the Burning Sun Flame God Magic Trap in the archway. Although they did not know exactly what level the magic trap was, they could tell from the name alone that its power was definitely quite terrifying. Didn't the name, Burning Sun Flame God, mean that it had the power to burn everything? Even though the name might be a bit exaggerated, it definitely wasn't something that people like them could deal with. Garl, who had been called out, had already lost his host, so his ability to devour was greatly affected. Besides, even if he had a host, it would be impossible for him to devour the Burning Sun Flame God magic trap. However, Garl refused to show weakness to Angelano, and thus yelled at the top of his voice, "Don't just talk about me, what about you? If you have what it takes, just break this trap." If it had been a magic gear, Garl definitely wouldn't have said that. After all, magic gears and alchemy were related to each other. However, Magic traps were different. They might be some sort of magic array or alchemy array, or perhaps even a mageth. Garl was very certain that as a goblin, Angelano definitely would not be capable of cracking it. HMPH, do you think everyone else is as incompetent as you? Today, I'll show you what Lord Angelano is made of. Although Angelano's forte was the alchemy colossus, he had still learned quite a bit about alchemy arrays from Lin Li during the days that he had spent in the Tower of Dusk. After all, he had a foundation in alchemy arrays. Although he could not compare to Lin Li, he had definitely reached the peak of the master level. Hence, Angelano did not take the burning sun flame god seriously, and instead sauntered across, ready to break the trap on the arch door. However, when he passed by Lin Li, the latter pulled him back. Although Garl did not dare to deceive Lin Li, he replied with some hesitation. As the abyssal demons in front of him were all at the legendary level, they should be rather competent. However, from the perspective of Garl, who was once the Lord Devourer, the abyssal demons were rather insignificant. He still remembered that, when they were signing the contract, Lin Li once mentioned that he would find a strong abyssal demon to become his host. Hence, he was naturally reluctant to settle for them. I need you to exhibit a certain amount of strength. Just find a random one and use it for the time being. I'll find you a better one in the future. Lin Li and Garl had a spiritual connection, so he knew what Garl was worried about. Okay, I can become a parasite to any demon as long as it has a body of flesh. Since some of the abyssal demons that were swarming in were stone demons that had granite-like bodies, while some were fire demons that were covered in flames, Garl asked for one with a body made of flesh. That request of his was actually not unexpected, so when Lin Li asked Garl the question, he had already chosen a target among the bunch of abyssal demons. After hearing Garl's answer, Lin Li swung his hand, and a large magic hand broke through the void and moved towards the abyssal demons. Soon, the target was caught. It was a level 22 abyssal griffin that was considered a superior existence among the abyssal demons. They were related to the griffins tamed by the griffin riders in the Felon Kingdom by blood. However, due to the different living environment, there were considerable differences in physical appearance and the power they could display. For example, in terms of physical size, the abyssal griffin was much more formidable. Its fur was black, which was a popular color in the abyssal demon, and its power was more inclined towards darkness and evil. A level 22 abyssal griffin was considered a powerful abyssal demon. In fact, it could even fight and kill 2 or 3 humans of the same level with its strength. However, despite having such strength, it could not resist Lin Li's magic hand at all. Other than roar incessantly, it couldn't even struggle. Lin Li had restrained the power of the abyssal griffin and threw it at Garl. He firmly said, "Just become its parasite for the time being." Actually, purely in terms of casting spells, Garl was probably much stronger than most human mages of the same level. However, to a sanctuary powerhouse like Lin Li, there was no meaning in having 1 or 2 more powerhouses that were at the peak of the legendary level. Lin Li had taken the trouble to take Garl under his wing because he was interested in Garl's ability to devour everything. Otherwise, he would have long slashed Garl. Besides, in order to make Garl better exhibit his ability to devour, a powerful demon host was definitely required. Garl could still use its devouring ability without a host, but having a proper host body would undoubtedly allow it to use that ability to a greater extent. Actually, one would be able to imagine the devouring ability of Garl, no matter how powerful it was. How much could something with a body the size of a fist devour? The Lord Devourer had a massive body and mouth, and thus it could even swallow several alchemy colossuses at once with ease. However, would Garl, who now had a tiny body, be able to do so? He probably could only devour ants. Of course, even if he had the body of the abyssal griffin, Garl would not be able to devour a large number of things like before. However, at least he would be able to make his devouring ability more useful and effective. In fact, to Garl, the host's body was like a decomposition domain that was filled with laws of disintegration. Unless Garl could enter the sanctuary realm, he would not be able to leave such a domain if he wanted to maximize his devouring ability. Moreover, unlike the tender elemental worm Xiaohua, which could continuously accumulate mana in its magical crystal, most of the power he devoured would not belong to him. Hence, he just needed to use the body of the host to store the mana that he had devoured before slowly absorbing it and transforming it himself. The abyssal griffin, which had its power sealed, was lying obediently in the area in the middle of the expedition team with anger and horror in its eyes. Garl was considered a fully mature body, and becoming a parasite to the abyssal griffin, that was only level 22, was rather easy. Although he didn't quite fancy the abyssal griffin, he did not dare to defy Lin Li's order in the slightest. He flew towards the abyssal griffin while muttering something. Upon sight of such an ugly little thing, like Garl flying close to him, the abyssal griffin immediately hollered in a hostile manner, revealing a threatening look. It clearly did not know how terrifying a devouring demon was. Garl naturally would not miss this opportunity, and as the abyssal griffin roared, he flew into the large mouth immediately. Seeing this scene, Archbishop Martin and others who did not know what was going on were immediately frightened. Isn't this courting death? The abyssal griffin has sharp fangs that can crush hard steel, let alone the small Garl. However, soon, the abyssal griffin that Garl had flown into began to show shocking changes. Firstly, the abyssal griffin's body expanded rapidly like an inflated balloon, and its strong body, that was initially filled with explosive power, became extremely swollen a moment later. The abyssal griffin's body looked like it was about to explode with a loud bang at any moment when it reached the size of 3 alchemy colossuses. However, that was not the end. Next, the abyssal griffin's mouth began to split open at both corners all of a sudden. It only stopped when it reached its bloated neck. A snake could swallow prey many times larger than its head because it could detach the bones in its jaws, and the abyssal griffin was probably doing something similar. Hence, it could open its mouth to a great extent. The huge mouth of the abyssal griffin was so large that it was almost the same as its transformed body. Although it could not swallow an alchemy colossus in one bite, it still would not have any problem swallowing more than 10 people at once. The black fur on the body of the abyssal griffin was falling off and being replaced by a layer of translucent crystals that were neatly arranged like scales. They gradually covered its entire body. The crystalline scales looked as fragile as glass, but their actual defense was probably no less powerful than that of the scales of worms. Soon, Garl completed the transformation of his host's body, and of course, the abyssal griffin's appearance became completely different again. Just as expected, its swollen body, exaggeratedly large mouth, and crystalline scales made the originally majestic abyssal griffin become an extremely hideous unknown creature. At this moment, Archbishop Martin and the others finally knew why Lin Li had taken the trouble to accept an underling like Garl. When they saw Lin Li dissecting the body of the Lord Devourer to force Garl out, Archbishop Martin and the others initially believed that Garl was just a parasitic creature in the body of the Lord Devourer, just like how parasites would inevitably exist in the bodies of humans or beasts. However, now that they had seen the abyssal griffin being transformed into such a state that was actually somewhat similar to the previous Lord Devourer, they knew that the real Lord Devourer was not the demon that looked massive. Recalling the terrifying power the Lord Devourer had displayed before, Archbishop Martin and the others couldn't help but get chills. That power was enough to contend with sanctuary powerhouses. If the Tower of Dusk had such a combat power, there would definitely be a huge increase in their power. Of course, despite having a new host, Garl's current strength still could not be compared to that of the Lord Devourer. After all, back then, he had accumulated his power and strength here for thousands of years. He had devoured numerous abyssal demons and the treasures that were originally collected here in order to reach that height. Disgusting. It's actually such a disgusting creature again. It's so revolting that it makes me want to throw up. Is your brain full of feces? Angelano mocked, obviously not missing the chance to ridicule Garl since they were enemies. Shut up, shorty. Garl was narrow-minded. If they were somewhere else at another time, he would definitely argue with Angelano for 3 days and nights, or even directly get physical. However, he knew clearly that if he were to fight with Angelano now, he would only end up provoking his master. Since Angelano was not bound by a contract, there was of course nothing for him to worry about. However, he was bound by a soul contract, and he would definitely be the unlucky one. However, Garl was not showing his weakness by choosing not to argue with Angelano. Instead, he just cunningly wanted to make Lin Li detest Angelano using such a method. To put it simply, he wanted to drive him mad before perishing. What, shorty? Get out of that disgusting thing if you have what it takes. Let's compete and see who's the short one. Angelano actually wasn't bothered by his height, because that was the truth anyway. Besides, according to the beauty standards of goblins, it was undoubtedly a perfect height. However, he could not accept hearing those words from Garl, who was the size of a fist. What right does he have to call me a shorty? Looking at the exasperated Angelano, Garl felt a little smug, but he did not express it. Instead, he seriously said, "Do you really think everyone is as free as you are? Look at the situation that we're facing now. Garl, are you very free? Once you're done with the transformation, get out." Lin Li was obviously aware of his little tricks. Besides, there was a soul contract between them. However, that was not a big deal, so Lin Li didn't bother blaming him. The smart aleck. "Yes, master." Upon hearing Lin Li's reprimand, Garl immediately changed his tone and sounded deferential like he was eager to please Lin Li. He moved his bloated body towards the area outside the team. He had already resigned himself to fate completely. Since he had already signed the soul contract, he had to accept fate. Hence, he accepted his identity as a servant. Although Garl had a host now, and had also undergone some transformation, his strength was still far inferior to the Lord Devourer's. There was only one way to increase his strength, and that was to accumulate power through constant devouring. Hence, the abyssal demons that were surrounding the expedition were naturally the best source of power. Using the passage that the expedition had cleared up, Garl writhed his large and bloated body and moved away. However, the abyssal demons did not fear him at all. As soon as he appeared, he was attacked by the abyssal demons. The abyssal demons here were all at the legendary level and above. The magic spells they used contained the nomological power of the legendary realm. At this moment, they were blasting at Garl with terrifying sounds. Even peak legendary powerhouses would not dare to confront them head-on by themselves. However, Garl was the nemesis of such dense and intense offensive spells. He opened his large mouth, and all the incoming spells suddenly charged into his mouth. All sorts of offensive spells including Thunderbolt, Flaming Meteor, and many others formed a massive funnel, with Garl's mouth being the bottom of it. Everyone finally saw the benefits of Garl, transforming the body of the host. Its large mouth was as wide as its body, and its entire body seemed like a big pocket, and a bottomless pit that swallowed up the incoming offensive spells. If Garl had not had a host, his small fist-sized body would not have been able to do so efficiently, since it had not reached the sanctuary realm yet. The overwhelming offensive spells that swarmed towards Garl were devoured in the blink of an eye. However, that was not the end. There were still more than 10 abyssal demons that were made of flesh. They were burly and almost not inferior to the Rotterdam Kingdom's alchemy colossuses. However, before the abyssal demons could even get close to Garl, they were sucked away from the surface as they surged into Garl's bloody mouth. Previously, looking at the scene of Garl devouring everything, Archbishop Martin and the others only felt horrified because the other party was their enemy. However, when they saw how daunting Garl was when devouring the things, and since they were in different positions, Archbishop Martin and the others were naturally in a good mood. Although the host's body that Garl had transformed was hideous, it could swallow everything in one gulp regardless of what offensive spells they were. It was still astonishing.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.